Nowadays we are just reporting like drone attacks, suicide bombing, fighting, and these blah 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 blah.
The Taliban or the military are lying about what is going on there, and the civilian deaths are therefore, in my personal opinion, misreported.
So whatever we are seeing reported in media, either in Pakistan or US or UK or wherever, it's second-hand information.
Is it legitimate to simply kill people with no prior judicial process?
It's very tempting to think it's people dropping in a desert through faceless machines.
In order to understand the politics and actions of the drones, it's kind of vital to understand those systems behind it as well. If you Google drone, the first image result is a picture of what appears to be a Reaper drone firing a missile. And this image, because it's the first result on Google, this is the power that gives it, has been endlessly transmitted through the media, endlessly reproduced. And you see it everywhere, from kind of the front page of newspapers to kind of activist reports. And the origins of that image are in a 3D hobbyist forum online. Some guy a few years ago created it, modeled it in 3D, painted it in Photoshop, put it on a background of some mountains. That drone doesn't exist. And so the most widely distributed image of this kind of incredibly liminal, strange technology is itself a dream.
Yeah, FATA is Pakistani area with the border of Afghanistan, and FATA it means federally administrative tribal area.
Tribal people are the ones who have been living here in this region, geographical area between Afghanistan and Pakistan for centuries, following their own customary laws. And because of the fact that there is an absence of judiciary or police in these areas, they also have their own weapons and their own defense systems. Houses over there are made into castles, and tribal head is the one that leads the whole family, and there are feuds between families, so they deal with them in the old customary ways before urbanization, before globalization came.
The impression I've gotten from especially the Western journalists coming into Pakistan for the first time, they presume it's some kind of medieval tribal society, and it gives them images of these, I don't know, raw wild warriors who cannot be tamed and thus have to be governed under a separate law. It's nothing like that. It's a part of Pakistan.
There are 7 agencies in FATA: South Waziristan, North Waziristan, Quram Agency, Bajawad Agency, Mumand Agency, and Khyber Agency, Aurakzai Agency. It's totally 7 agencies.
According to estimates, we haven't had a proper census in ages, but according to estimates made in 2008, I think, there are 5.3 million people living in FATA right now. In around 1849, when the colonization was still taking shape in the Indian subcontinent, the Britishers introduced a separate law in FATA. In 1901, the first frontier crime regulations were introduced, which is the FCR. And that law has prevailed from 1901 till now, almost intact.
The FCR is what does not give any political rights to the people, severe human rights violation there, no press freedom rights.
There is also no any mobile services and no net facilities, internet facilities in many areas. There are ban on mobile, camera mobile and even the net and even the TV channels.
What the FCR does is gives actually judicial power, even digital power, to the administrative setup in FATA, which actually allows whatever criminal activity is going there, it has to be governed by their own laws, by their own people, by the administrative structure. So it kind of cuts off the region from the country's own legal system. I mean, 2011, for the first time, we start seeing a bit of amendments being introduced. In 2002, a FATA secretariat was set up, which were the beginning of what you can call political reforms there. But the reforms have so far been very ineffective in a way that they are not radical.
Drones are this almost slightly mysterious thing. It's very strange in an age of kind of pervasive surveillance, technological networked communication, constant visual imagery, that something that's so visible, particularly in the media at the moment, can actually remain deeply invisible in many ways. Drones particularly are sort of designed to be invisible because they operate at altitude, they operate above our heads, they operate, places we don't look up and look for them very often. We're not used to doing that. They're also, in military terms, capable of operating so high above that we can't see them. They're equipped with cameras that can look far further than we can.
Drones are used in three main ways. They're used for surveillance, certainly in a military context, and increasingly, within the coming decade, we will see more and more civilian applications of surveillance drones. Then there's military armed drones, so used alongside conventional weapons in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, for example. And then there's this third category of covert drones. Now, covert drones are drones which are used away from the battlefield to kill specific, sometimes not that specific, individuals, or to target specific groups which are believed to pose a threat. And this is the area that we've studied because it seems to us that this is the most problematic area of the use of drones.
I became slightly obsessive. I started making models of them. I have sort of little, children's plastic models of drones that you can buy. I wanted to actually stand in front of one of them and kind of look at it eye to eye. So we went out into the car park of my studio, and using a schematic downloaded from the internet, we literally outlined the shadow of one of these things, a one-to-one scale outline of it on the ground. And as soon as we did that, we realized we kind of hit upon something quite serious and something quite powerful, because it immediately communicated the scale of these things. The first reaction for everyone who sees it is, wow, I had no idea how big it was. But just by drawing the outline, it also emphasizes the invisibility of this thing, the fact that it's this void at the heart of the discussion. It's the void at the heart of the network. It's the void at the heart of the war. We installed one outside the gallery, which faces onto the main entrance of the White House. So this is the gallery, and you have the Washington Monument in the background, and this is the entrance to the White House over here. I don't think these things have a very direct effect on power. Like, this isn't a threat to anyone immediately in any way. My hope is that it creates a debate and creates an image in people's mind that kind of makes it stick there. If there's a drone 5,000 feet overhead that you can't see, you have no power and no agency in this situation, and the drone and its operators and the systems around it have all of the power and the agency. So you already have a deeply unequal power relationship, which always ends in violence.
In June 2011, we started re-examining everything that was in the public domain on drone strikes, and particularly on the impact on civilians. And what we found was several hundred civilian casualties that simply hadn't been included in the independent estimates. So the CIA at that point was claiming that drones were an incredibly surgical and accurate weapon that was causing virtually no civilian casualties. And what we found was something considerably more disturbing. We found several hundred civilian casualties.
Earlier on, I mean, in the tribal belt, nobody really knew what was the tribal belt about, what was going on there in the 90s or even before. Still, I mean, the tribal belt has existed since the independence time. But after 9/11, the tribal belt became a focus for many international journalists, and who started interacting with the local journalists over there. And because of the fact that this was where the Taliban fled. I mean, we do know that Osama bin Laden also came through the tribal areas into Pakistan, and other such international terrorists have come into Pakistan through the tribal belt. So the tribal belt has become a hotbed of all of this international terrorism and global jihad. Why people confuse the fact that Taliban and the tribal people might be same is because they are occupying the same territory. That happened during the time of the 80s when we had a military dictator here called General Ziaul Haq, who sided with the Americans to fight the Soviets. And at that time, the Saudis also got involved, and a lot of jihadis, that as they were called, or jihadists that they were called, were exported to this area. And they were trained over here in camps, and they were then sent to Afghanistan to fight the Soviets.
Before from 9/11, the America and the world was supporting these jihadis and organizations and groups that they are fighting for Islam and they are doing jihad, and you should support them. And after 9/11, the scenario totally changed. So this was like unbelievable that from last 20 years, America saying to us and funding them that these are jihadis and you should support them. And now directly they are saying to us that these are not jihadis, these are terrorists, and this.
When 9/11 happened, Pakistan was asked to join the war on terror with the United States, and Pakistan gave a lot of bases here to operate from. So the U.S. forces would use the supply route also, and would use bases in Pakistan to operate in Afghanistan. Pakistani military, which was ruling at that time here, was giving safe havens to the Taliban who were fleeing from Afghanistan into the tribal belt because the geographical proximity and the nearbyness of it. And at the same time, it was telling the world and the NATO and the US forces that we're with you, and whatever you want, you can do from us. So it was playing a double game.
See, in 9/11, it didn't just change FATA. In my opinion, it changed the whole world in terms of military engagements and what was legitimate and not. We saw all these invasions happening, Iraq, Afghanistan, and then drones.
The landscapes of conflict were part of the reporting of those conflicts, and they deeply influenced our understanding of them. For the last almost 200 years, journalists and illustrators and then photographers would be present on battlefields. This isn't the case with the drone war. We may occasionally hear the names of places where strikes have occurred, but there's no formal reporting, and so that's very unclear. So I don't know what these places look like. And yet it struck me at the same time, we've spent the last 20 years building civilian online systems that are designed to allow us to see things more clearly. So I started researching the sites of drone strikes using data gathered by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, and finding as best I could the locations of those strikes on online digital maps. And I take screenshots, essentially photograph that landscape of the satellite images, and then I post that information back to Instagram, which is a social service for sharing photographs. The real thing is simply to show that these are real places. I think most people's mental image of where these things happen is of kind of just like empty deserts. They're not. They're towns. They're places where people live. You can see cars in the street. You can see the buildings.
Like the rest of the world, even Pakistanis are guilty of seeing Fatah as the other. In Urdu, we call it ilaq-e-ghair. Ilaq-e-ghair means the place of the other. So if you see them as the other, you cannot empathize with them.
I think it's very hard to disentangle what is indifference and what is invisibility, and just what counts as invisibility, because we've also discussed how a lot is actually known. There is actually a fairly well documented reports of the abuses, deaths, casualties, interventions, strikes, failed strikes. Yet we are inclined to not consider that kind of information and knowledge as producing visibility, because that information and knowledge does not translate into action. So it seems to lack efficacy, and information that lacks efficacy does not dispel the darkness.
We were seated in the Merali, North Waziristan agency, the our tribe bazaar, and some group came there and kidnapped a person and shifted him to the other village. So we thought that if we mention the kidnappers in our news story, so the next day they will come and sit in front of our elders that your nephew or your son has mentioned me in this story, and I want 30 lakhs fine, government fine me. And we also thought that if we would mention the kidnapped person by kidnapper, that he kidnapped by those persons, so he will come that is unhonorable. And also we thought that if we mention the place from where he kidnapped, then the political administration will arrest the whole village. If we mention the fourth village that kidnapper shifted the kidnapped person to the Blah village, then political administration also arrest them. So that's why we made a new story. I remember till that unknown people came, kidnapped an unknown person from unknown place and shifted him to unknown area.
Majority of the Pakistani reporters or journalists resort to self-censorship. They know there are taboo topics. There are things that they cannot talk about. And because of that, they do not talk about, for example, military issues. They do not talk about Taliban issues at times. And there's a lot of... So it's unknown people are mentioned. Unknown people killed these people. Even though they might know who it is, they will not name it. In the tribal belt, for the longest time, most of the news channels, most of the newspapers would say security forces are operating, even though it is the Pakistan military operating. So why don't you say Pakistan military? No, you cannot say Pakistan military, because the Pakistan military will come and question you as to why you're referring to them as their name.
I think in 2005 or 6, Hayatullah was one of the first journalists who actually pictured a US drone attack. Before that, the government narrative was that there are no drones coming in, there is no US intervention going on. Then suddenly there is this journalist who pictures a rubble which has made in US there. There is a journalist who actually gives concrete proof. He's killed, but he's not the only one who's killed. His wife goes on air, gives some interview which angers a few people, and then she's killed as well.
There are just 3M, I mean military, militancy and media. And sometimes also the 2M's, double M, military and militancy, get together against the third M, media. If you see, there are many crocodiles and groups and powerful stakeholders and the elephants fighting each other, and we are just like a sandwich among them.
In FATA, most of these reporters that operate they're not actually journalists to begin with. They're usually, some of the ones that I met have businesses. They're probably operating a shop there. They're operating petrol pumps there. And these are the ones who are working for international agencies like Reuters and AP and all of them. In the last 10 years, around about 12 journalists have been killed in the tribal belt. And many of them are friends of the ones who are already working there. And these friends that you see, they're working there, they're working under a condition where their friends have been killed. Nobody has investigated it. There has been nobody punished. They don't even know who did it. You have to understand this is probably one journalist a year. So that's a lot of impact. And also, there are not many journalists operating in the tribal belt. There are, I think, around about 100 journalists operating. So, that's a high percentage if you look at it from that point of view. Also, at the same time, overall in the country, more than 100 journalists have been killed in the last 60 years. And majority of them the killings have happened after the 9/11.
The biggest challenge is simply the lack of information on particular incidents, and particularly the lack of information about who is being killed. Often we'll have the name of one individual, maybe a militant leader, but he will be one of 6 or 7 people who's killed, and about the people who have died alongside him, we will know nothing at all. Over time, you end up with quite a huge range from a minimum to a maximum number of people killed. So for Pakistan at the moment, we show between 2,500 and 3,500 people being killed. So we can't say with certainty what that number is, but we feel that it's somewhere in that range based on the reporting that we have.
The key appeal of drones to policymakers, to those who decide where we go to war, and to the military is that shooting them down has no human cost. They are actually quite a vulnerable technology. They're not that difficult to destroy. It's a lot easier to shoot one down than a fighter jet, for example. But doing so doesn't produce any body bags, essentially, and that's the greatest political cost for kind of Western politicians in going to war. So it renders the kind of physical cost of these things invisible, because most people only care about deaths on their own side. Politically, therefore, it kind of renders it invisible as well, because there's no political cost involved in doing this. And it seems to render it morally invisible as well. Watching the Watchers is a project where I've been using Google Earth, which is this kind of vast wealth of imagery, and not just current imagery, but historical imagery, to show the locations where drones are based, where they're operated from. They've been captured by satellite photography. Spending a huge amount of time with these digital mapping tools, you realise quite how comprehensive they are, but how little explored. Deep in the desert in Saudi Arabia, it's a long way from kind of anywhere else. This base isn't visible at all on Google Earth, but because of the competing nature of these mapping technologies, if you go and visit this location in Bing Maps, Microsoft service, again from high up it appears to be a kind of featureless desert, and as you zoom in it reveals the contours of this kind of totally remote airstrip with a series of bunkers. Now there's no drones visible in this one, but various other journalists and researchers have confirmed that this is a base in which they are planning to fly. For almost 10 years, the US and Pakistani governments totally denied that there were any Predator aircraft stationed within Pakistan. And yet, sometime in 2009, 2010, images appeared on Google Earth. This is at Shamsi Air Base in Pakistan, and this one's really significant, because if we go up to 2011, which is the most recent kind of image of it, you see a largely empty airbase. You see these hangars. But tracking back to 2004, these Predators are there. And this is really key, because this imagery wasn't released until a couple of years ago. And it suddenly gave the lie to both the American and Pakistani position that no drones were operating here. They'd said that there were no drones based in Pakistan, and yet this image had been captured by Google satellites kind of 6-7 years previously. That immediately became international news, and as a result, it kind of forced this, release of the information about a huge portion of the drone war that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. And there's something fascinating to me about that was uncovered almost inadvertently by civilian technology.
When it comes to the politics of drones, for the longest time in this country, the government had been lying to its people and saying that the drone attacks are something that are violating our sovereignty and are being forced onto us. But then recently we saw Pervez Musharraf, who was the retired general from the last military dictator at the time of 9/11, he was ruling the country. He accepted on an international TV channel saying that yes, we did accept to these drone strikes, and so but not in these numbers. Now the numbers are always questionable, but they did accept. So there was, and then WikiLeaks also has shown the same. The last prime minister in the former government, saying that you continue with the drone strikes while we will continue to condemn it. So the politics is publicly condemn, secretly agree.
One stakeholder is America, US, about in drone case, and one is Pakistan government, and one is Taliban there, and the fourth are just victims of drones. The civilian, the common population of the area.
The whole thing of drone attacks, they happen there because there is no parliament, there is no legislator who would be held accountable for the stuff happening there. Imagine a drone attack happens in, let's say, KP. Would the government or the party in power ever have the chance of being elected again? They won't have the chance. We have 11 representatives from FATA in the National Assembly and the Senate. But since they do not have the power to legislate for their own area, the people cannot hold them accountable. So in the end, the people who are getting elected into the assemblies have nothing to lose. And the people there do not have the power to influence the political decisions that are happening there. So whatever I do, it's not really going to harm anybody in the long run. So that's why I think this whole thing is possible.
For a long time, there was a discussion that was going on with journalists asking politicians about what they called the kill lists. And the kill list was very literally, what is this list of names of people that you are assassinating with drones? Where do those names come from? Who compiles that list? And politicians pretty much straight up denied there was any such list, ignoring the fact that there was an assassination program going on. Though again, that wasn't officially admitted for a very long time. When that started to be admitted, the US Department of Defense started coming up with their own set of terminology to describe this process. And the term that emerged was disposition matrix. Now, no one's really sure what the disposition matrix is. All that we know is it's some kind of intelligence gathering system that results in a kill list.
The thing is, in the absence of official transparency about the drone strikes, we are stuck trying to piece together a picture afterwards, like doing a jigsaw puzzle from the glass of a broken window or something. You're trying to piece together the clearest picture that you can, but ultimately the most detailed information about the drones, about who they're targeting, about why they're targeting that individual, about what's known about the other individuals who might die alongside them, all of that is completely secret. And in the absence of official transparency, there's very, very little that we can say with confidence about the killing program that's in operation.
Drones are not just secrets themselves, but they're used as kind of vehicles for that secrecy. They're used as an excuse and as a way of covering up, because we've kind of allowed that to happen, essentially, and it's absolutely vital that we don't allow that to continue. So for me, one of the dangers of these unequal power relationships produced by this invisibility is that it's impossible to know, what is going on at any time, and therefore it's impossible to have a debate around it.
There can seem to be a cartoon-like distribution between power and counterpower, where power knows and is quite sort of sophisticated in its ironic or cynical appreciation of the situation. So yes, we know that the public good is just a story, or yes, of course we know that this is a dirty business. While then counterpower gets pushed into this role of defender of purity, virtue, etc. That is really something that information activism and digital mapping has to be really wary of being pushed in that role of being the idealist who cannot appreciate how things really happen or are really done. Because so often the broader context of public debate is that we all know we're just having this debate where we're claiming to care about these issues, but then we know that elsewhere something else happens. So what I would like is for information activism, or the left, or whatever name you want to give to these counterpowers, that they also build that intelligence in their own practices, that yes, we know that in different settings, different rules apply, that the government is a different beast in different spaces.
I don't think there are quick, easy ways to disempower those who are in power. But I also think that they're only there because we don't fully understand how they operate. And technology is a fantastic way of making clear the processes by which unequal power is maintained. And so the correct use of it can kind of empower everybody, which lowers the kind of the power threshold that others might hold over us.
What does it mean to be critical, or to be engaged, and to use mapping practices politically? I think it is a lot about shifting the sites and not accepting the ways in which the space of accountability is already organized.
This is a targeted killing program. These drone strikes are not taking place on a battlefield. The legal arguments under which the drone strikes are taking place, the legal framework under which they're taking place, remains very, very contested. So even though we can say that there are improvements in the way that they're being used, even though we can say that civilian deaths are falling precipitously, the question then is that good enough? Is it acceptable to have essentially a targeted killing program? That to our mind is one of the key issues. Is it legitimizing the practice of targeted killing?